Well, it's Thursday again. Time for a few thoughts on our readings and devotionals from All Things New. I've been getting them in my inbox and I've really appreciated them. It's been challenging and encouraging. The last number of days we've been reading in Revelation chapter 7. Chapter 7 is where we first hear about the number 144,000. That's a number that has captured my imagination as, we read about apocalyptic events in the book of Revelation. It's a number that has also been a focus for a lot of different religious groups and even cults over the years as they try to figure out who's in this 144,000 and whether there's a spot for me. And it even can be seen as a thing of anxiety for some people. But one of the things I want to point out about this number 144,000 is that it's a metaphorical number. Numbers in apocalyptic literature very rarely are literal numbers. And there's a good reason for this. See, 12 is a number that relates to the tribes, and you have the 12 apostles. And the number 1,000 is a number that's like a complete number, a number that signifies a huge, uncountable amount. So you have 12 times 1,000. It's something way beyond just a literal number. The other reason we know this is because when it names the 12 tribes here, it's actually messed up. John has changed the order and even the names of the tribes here, so we know something metaphorical is going on. What we find actually is that the first part of chapter 7, which talks about the tribes, and the second part of chapter 7 that talks about the multitudes that are before the throne are actually the same group of people. How do we know this? Well, in chapter 7, verse 4, John says, I heard the number 144,000. And then it lists the 12 tribes, 12,000 from each. But then in chapter 7, verse 9, it says, after this, I looked. It's a different sense, but it's the same group that he's talking about. He says, I looked, and there was this great multitude from every nation, tribe, and tongue, and language. What we see here is that this 144,000 is about those who have been redeemed. It goes on later in chapter 7 to say that these are those who have come out of the great tribulation. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. This gives me hope. This is encouragement to me because this multitude that we are a part of, this multitude before the throne, we are not there because of our own righteousness or because we deserve it, but because our robes are white through the blood of the Lamb that has made us clean and righteous. Even though there is a lot of imagery and metaphors that we find in the scripture of Revelation, I don't want you to get overwhelmed by that. You can read it and understand it. The MB Seminary has actually produced a seminar with Dr. Darrell Johnson, who's written a commentary that helps us understand some principles for how we read Revelation. And if you want to check that out, you go to the MB Seminary website, and under the Equipping tab in the menu, you'll find that seminar there. It's a great 1-hour video that talks about how we can read and understand these scriptures. The reading for today was for the beginning of chapter 8. And in this reading in chapter 8, it talks about the prayers of the saints that are offered up before God. Do you ever feel like your prayers aren't being heard or answered? Here in Revelation, it reminds us that the prayers that we send up to God are represented not just as a intangible thing, but here in this apocalyptic literature, it talks about how they rise in the smoke of the incense of the altar before God. These prayers are prayers calling out for God's righteousness and God's judgment, for God to come and make all things right. That too is a source of hope and encouragement for me, and I hope for you too. Life often feels like it's just not the way it ought to be. The promise that we have, the promise that is spoken of here in Revelation chapter 8, is that God hears our prayers, anguish, our struggle, our suffering, and then he will act and he will make all things right. I hope this is an encouragement for your day. God bless you.